In 1975, in the Midlands of the United Kingdom, the elusive Black Panther struck again. Only this time, it was a kidnapping of a young heiress. It is the case of a person who went from a home invader to a kidnapper-murderer in a short period of time. What's ahead? Welcome to the TheCrime329. Today we'll be looking at the case of Donald Neilson. But before that, please consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed already to our YouTube channel. Now, let's get into the spine-chilling case. Our episode begins in the village of Highley in Shropshire, England, located on the west bank of the River Severn. Originally a farming village, the discovery of coal turned the area into a large coal mining industry that remained in operation until the late 1960s. Shropshire is a landlocked area in the West Midlands of England, but borders Wales and is considered the birthplace of industry. On the morning of January 14, 1975, Dorothy Whittle took a bowl of cornflakes up to her 17-year-old daughter's room to wake her up for the day, as was her routine. When she opened the door, she was surprised not to find Leslie in bed. After calling out for her and getting no reply, she went to call Leslie's older brother, Ronald, who lived close by. However, she was unable to do so as the phone line was dead. Dorothy drove to Ronald, where he assured her that Leslie probably got up early and took the coach or bus to school early as she had been studying for her exams. When Dorothy and Ronald returned to the Whittle residence, that theory was proven incorrect. In the lounge, a Turkish Gillette box was found to contain 4 small rolls of dino tape that, when rolled out, told the family that Leslie had been kidnapped and the kidnapper was demanding a £50,000 ransom. The tape's message also warned the family: no police, no tricks, or death. Additional directions told the family to have someone go to a telephone kiosk in the Swan Shopping Centre in Kidderminster. They were to arrive by 6 p.m. and wait until they were contacted. The call would come in sometime between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m. When the phone rang, the person answering the call was only to give their name, and then they would be told where to go next to drop off the ransom payment. What would make Leslie, a quiet, friendly, studious girl, a target of a kidnapper? She happened also to be an heiress to the Whittle Transportation Company. Her father, George, had died 3 years previously and had left his entire fortune to Dorothy, Ronald, and Leslie, which at the time was £250,000 to £300,000. There was a bit of a scandal with George's passing and his decision to leave everything to Dorothy, who he had been with for 30 years, and his kids. George and Dorothy were never married, as he was still married to his first wife, Selina. Selina had contested the will and had won a significant settlement. All of this had hit the media, which had covered the sordid affair. Dorothy and Ronald didn't hesitate to contact the police, with Detective Chief Superintendent Bob Booth leading the investigation. Detective Booth had an impressive history of solving all 70 cases he investigated. It was decided that Ronald would take the ransom to the telephone kiosk with undercover officers stationed nearby. Inspector Eddie Barry was stationed 50 yards from the telephone banks to record any calls that came in to the kiosk. What happened next would be the first of many missteps by the authorities. In The Killer's Show, Detective Booth is interviewed years later. He would say the first blunder came when he did not request a news blackout. The investigators had worked hard to keep Leslie's kidnapping quiet, and since things were moving so quickly, they didn't think the press would become aware of the story until after Leslie's safe return. However, that assumption would turn out to be a mistake. News broke of the heiress's kidnapping that afternoon, and the press descended onto Highley, and they were relentless. An employee of the Whittle Transportation Company had leaked what was happening to the press. It got so bad that when Randall went to the telephone kiosks, the press followed and kept trying to take pictures and interview him. They didn't seem to care that a young woman's life was on the line. The officer in charge at the Swan Shopping Center decided to call off the vigil, as he felt the kidnapper would not call at all due to the media coverage. However, it doesn't seem like he told everyone he was calling it off, as Officer Eddie Barry was still monitoring the phones. It was around midnight that he heard one of the phones ringing. No one was there to pick up the phone call. To say Detective Booth was livid as he had not been informed that Ronald was sent home would be an understatement. He took it personally, as he had let the family down. It was going on 24 hours since Leslie was taken from her home when authorities were notified by Whittle employee Len Rutt that he had answered a call from Leslie. At first, he thought it was her, but to his disappointment, it was only a recording. The recording was as follows. "Mum, you need to go to Kids Grove's post office telephone box. The instructions are inside. I'm okay, but there are to be no police and no tricks, okay?" The recording was as follows. "Mum, you need to go to Kids Grove's post office telephone box. The instructions are inside. I'm okay, but there are to be no police and no tricks, okay?" It was decided once again that Ronald would be the courier. Kids Grove was 75 miles from Hyley, so he had a distance to go, but before he could leave, the Scotland Yard surveillance team wanted to fit Ronald with a transmitter. This would just record his movements. Detective Booth contacted the local authorities in Kids Grove, informing them of a highly sensitive ransom drop being made in the area. Detective Booth didn't want any interference from the Staffordshire police, asking them to just stay in bed. Ronald finally drove off, but due to all the time it took for the transmitter fitting and notification of local authorities, he was over an hour late. It also didn't help that when he arrived at the phone booth, he couldn't find the instructions that were taped to the backboard. Once he retrieved them, he was told to drive a mile away to a road running through Bathpool Park. He was to go to a specific location, wait in the car, and flash his lights. Once an hour had passed with no indication that the kidnapper was coming, Ronald was again sent home. The next day, Detective Booth wanted to do a full-scale search of Bathpool Park, but he was overruled by Scotland Yard, who was concerned that if the kidnapper were watching, it would tip him off that the police were involved, and that would put Leslie's life in even more danger. A compromise was reached, with Scotland Yard offering to send in some undercover officers to do a discreet search of the park. Detective Booth relented, and over a 2-day search, he was informed that nothing of significance was found. Detective Booth asked the family if they would be willing to make a direct appeal to the kidnapper, as they had not heard from him in a few days. Ronald gave a TV interview telling the kidnapper that he waits by the phone day and night for his call. He also had a message for those pretending to be the kidnapper, and that was to knock it off. Hoping that the kidnapper would respond led to nothing but disappointment. 9 days after Leslie's kidnapping, the investigation stalled until Detective Booth received a call about an abandoned vehicle in Dudley with the license plate TTV 454H, linked to the night Ronald was waiting for the kidnapper to call. On January 15, 1975, near the Freightliner Railway Depot in Dudley, security guard Gerald Smith was shot 6 times by a gunman resembling a tramp. This incident happened just 300 yards from the abandoned car, which went unchecked for 8 days. When finally searched, the car revealed crucial evidence: a tape recorder, cassette tape, rope, flashlight, and a pair of ladies' slippers. The tape confirmed the car had transported Leslie, with her voice instructing her mother to follow a route to find ransom instructions. 4 envelopes with further ransom instructions were also found, leading to Detective Booth to retrace Ronald's steps that night. The trail took him to the telephone kiosks in Dudley near the car's location, and then to the Freightliner Railway Depot, where Gerald Smith was shot. Booth became convinced that Leslie's kidnapper was also Smith's shooter. Ballistics tests on the bullets would soon steer the investigation in a new direction. The bullets found in Gerald Smith matched those from 3 sub-postmaster murders in 1974, all linked to the elusive Black Panther. On February 15th, 1974, the Panther broke into the home of sub-postmaster Donald Skepper in Harrogate, North Yorkshire. He awoke Skepper's 18-year-old son at gunpoint, ordering him to retrieve the safe's keys. Skepper, trying to resist, was fatally shot by the intruder, dying in his wife's arms. Sub-postmasters often lived at their post office locations, which made them easy targets. Despite police roadblocks, the Panther escaped by following a stream and catching a train. He struck again on September 6, 1974, killing sub-postmaster Derek Austin, and on November 11, 1974, shooting Sidney Grayland dead and severely beating his wife Margaret at the Langley Telegraph sub-office. The Black Panther was also tied to around 400 home invasions, his method including forcing windows, cutting phone lines, and wearing dark clothing with a black balaclava. Despite investigators identifying him as Leslie Whittle's kidnapper, his true identity remained a mystery. The police had a description: 5'5" to 5'7", athletic, possibly over 35, with dark hair, wild eyes, and a semi-lantern jaw. based on encounters with surviving victims. In February 1972, the Black Panther broke into a sub-post office in Leslie Richardson's home. Awakened by the intruder, Leslie fought back, ripping off the burglar's hood, while his wife called the police. During the struggle, 2 gunshots were fired into the ceiling, but the Black Panther fled empty-handed. 6 weeks after Leslie Whittle's kidnapping, the police were still at a dead end. Detective Booth and Ronald Whittle went on TV to plead for contact from the kidnapper. Booth, feigning ignorance about the second failed ransom drop, used this as a pretext to search Bathpool Park again. This search uncovered overlooked evidence. A piece of dymo tape reading dropped the suitcase into the hole, and a wrench near a drain shaft. These discoveries deepened tensions between Booth, Scotland Yard, and the Staffordshire police. 51 days after Leslie's abduction, crime scene investigator Philip Mastery was called to search Bathpool Park's underground shafts. In one shaft, he found a reporter's notebook, a tape recorder, and pencils. In another, he descended 60 feet to discover Leslie's naked body hanging from a wire noose, just inches off the shaft floor. Evidence suggests that she died of a heart attack the night of the failed ransom drop, as her neck wasn't broken and there was no signs of strangulation. Authorities questioned why Leslie's kidnapper didn't collect the ransom and killed her instead. One theory suggests the kidnapper confused the nearby couple's car with Ronald's, leading to panic when a police car arrived. Detective Booth believes this mistake, coupled with the police presence, caused the kidnapper to return to Leslie and, in a rage, push her off the platform. However, other officials, including Harold Wright, head of Staffordshire CID, dispute this, denying any police presence that night. After Leslie's body was found, Detective Booth was removed from the case, demoted for what his superiors considered unprofessionalism. Despite a flood of public tips and evidence from Bathpool Park, including a flashlight, dymo tape, and binoculars, the police found no solid leads on the Black Panther. On December 11, 1975, nearly a year after Leslie's kidnapping, 2 patrol officers in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, noticed the suspicious man. When approached, the man, later identified as Donald Neilson, pulled a sawed-off shotgun on them, demanding they drive out of town. A struggle ensued in the car, leading to the man's arrest with the help of a passerby. Neilson remained silent for 2 days before finally revealing his identity. Donald Neilson, born Donald Napier on August 1, 1936, in Bradford, was raised by his grandmother after his mother's early death. Bullying over his last name led him to drop out of school at 15. At 18, Donald Neilson's life seemed to improve when he was drafted into the army, where he thrived and became a lance corporal. He married Irene Tate, who convinced him to leave the army to start a family. Their daughter, Catherine, was born in 1960, and Donald changed their last name to Neilson to protect her from the bullying he faced. Though successful in construction for a while, by the 1970s, financial struggles pushed Neilson to use his military skills for home invasions and robberies. Neilson committed over 400 burglaries before turning to rob nearly 18 sub-post offices, earning the nickname Brace-and-Bit Robber for his method of drilling into window frames to gain entry. In 1972, after reading about George Whittle's estate scandal, Neilson planned his biggest score, the kidnapping of Leslie Whittle. On January 14, 1975, Neilson broke into the Whittle home, kidnapped Leslie at gunpoint, and drove her 65 miles to Bathpool Park, Staffordshire. There, he forced her onto a 90-foot ventilation shaft, tethering her from a metal noose. Neilson claimed that Leslie accidentally slipped off the platform during one of his visits, denying any intent to kill her. Neilson, known as the Black Panther, stood trial on June 14, 1976, and was found guilty of Leslie's kidnapping and murder. He was also convicted on July 6, 1976 for 3 additional murders, but was acquitted of attempted murder, sentenced to life in prison with a whole life tariff. He was never eligible for parole. Donald Neilson died in prison on December 18, 2011, at age 75, from a motor neuron disease similar to ALS. What's your opinion of this case? I would like to know your view on this case in the comment section. Till then, take care and keep watching The Haunt 329.